care of. So anyway, stand by. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Joe and Joe Weather Show on this Saturday night. It's not often Joe and I do shows on a Saturday night, but with this storm system moving through the deep south and up the eastern seaboard, why not? And the Joe and Joe Weather Show brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware. That's what it looks like from the outside, the storefront at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. And they should be there now. I'm switching hotspots. I'm getting off the hotspot. All right, let's turn that back. No, I got to turn that off. And let's turn the hotspot off, which we're going to do. Okay, so that's done. All right, so good. All right, so one other thing I got to do here is change a setting. And that should, looks like the wheel of death is gone. So much for that. I was trying to go for my hotspot because I have a lot more signal power on the hotspot in theory. Okay, there's a lot of things in life that work in theory that don't work in reality, and apparently that might be one of them. So anyhow, let's keep our fingers crossed that everything goes okay. Joe Rayo, I wanted to tell you that tonight, the musical portion of tonight's broadcast is brought to you by the Bolovetsian Dance No. 2 by Borodek. And the reason why I bring
I'm sure you recognize this wonderful melody, A Stranger in Paradise.
But did you know that the original theme was from the Bolovetsian Dance No. 2 by Borodek? Yes, I happened to see. I think the actor's name was John Williams. I was watching the end of Dial M for Murder. Hitchcock was on Turner Classic Movies this afternoon, and he plays the detective in that movie. So I saw that, and I immediately thought, because he was the one I think who did the commercials. I immediately thought of the Bolovetsian Dance No. 2 by Borodek. Okay, so
he also played Niles French, who was Sebastian Cabot's brother.
Yes.
On Family Affair for a while too. Anyway,
the world we live in. Okay, so I'm going to try something different tonight, just to keep the show moving as smoothly as possible. So this could be dangerous, but we'll do the best we can. And anyhow, we're going to spend time on this whole storm that is impacting a lot of states here. I mean, this is running through the deep south. I'm sitting right now, Joe, at 38 with a winter storm warning. And what's interesting is, now follow me on this, because they're going above 20. Now I'm at 2,200 feet. They're going for 8 inches or more, 2,500 feet or higher. Now that puts me perilously close, because I figure, just the 850 level is roughly 5,000 feet up. So I'm 2,200 feet up. The soundings give you measurements for the 925 millibar level. So I'm at about 950. Okay. And that difference is sort of like what used to happen in Manhattan when I would look at the cameras from the top of the Citibank Tower, which was about 43 or 44 stories high, about 500 feet, up, where it would be snow. You'd see moderate to heavy snow falling on the 43rd floor. And then by the time it got to the ground, it was all rain. So that's kind of where I am here. But I noticed that on the soundings from the European in particular, it gets very cold at the 925 millibar level after midnight tonight and tomorrow morning. So I'm thinking that's going to mix down here. So I'm going to be really, my curiosity is so piqued on this, and some of the models are still giving me some pretty, fairly sizable amounts. Even if I get half of that, I'll be happy. But I'm really curious as to what kind of day I'm going to have here tomorrow. And that, by the way, leads me to tonight's poll, which, the polls lately have had this theme surrounding this particular storm and, what will Joe Rayo get and what will I get? So tonight poll says winter storm warning for Joe Chaffee, winter weather advisory for Joe Rayo. And yet for both of us, they're roughly going for the Weather Service where you are, Joe, is going for roughly the same amount of snow as they're going for me under the 2,500 foot level. So the question is a simple one. Who gets more snow Sunday? Will it be Joe Rayo or will it be me? And so far, Joe, with 95 votes in tow, counted, okay, including votes from the city of Atlanta, by the way, 60% say me and 40% say you.
Well, Joe, I'm thinking about, for me now, I'm thinking about 2 to maybe 3 inches of snow. And then on top of all of that, some ice and sleet, eventually changing to rain. And I am not looking forward to Monday morning, because Monday morning, if we're gonna get quite a bit of rain. And I think after midnight or 1 a.m., everything is going to go over to rain, even up here. And if we pick up, let's say, a half to 1 inch of rain on top of 2 or 3 inches of snow, that's going to be a real mess for me come early Monday morning. And for you, I think you're right in there for at least 2 to maybe 5 inches, maybe even a little bit more considering the altitude.
Mm-hmm.
But it certainly looks like. And incidentally, you're at what now? 38 degrees.
Hang on, let me check. Yep, 38.
All right, I'm a full 30 degrees colder than you. I'm sitting at 8. I'm sitting at 8 degrees right now. I'm glad I'm sitting inside and not outdoors.
Okay, the Rochester rule, by the way, which should work. The Rochester rule is when you get a high that comes down like this from eastern Canada and you get a northerly wind screaming down the Hudson Valley like you got last night and today, that the 1 o'clock temperature at Rochester, New York, the 1 p.m. temperature in Rochester, New York, will be the morning low in New York City Central Park the next day. So Rochester at 1 o'clock was, drum roll please, 6.
6.
So let's see if we get down to 6. And I have to tell you something, by the way, before we get rolling on the maps. I have to tell you something, Joe. We don't get cold air masses like this in the Northeast. Well, in our part of the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states, they come and usually get at least one a winter that's like this. If it's a really active winter, you get many more. But it's remarkable that tomorrow morning, places are going to be waking up to temperatures in the low single digits or near zero or possibly even below zero. Particularly if you go north of New York City, it's going to be single digits down into southern New Jersey, to southeastern Pennsylvania. And 12 hours after that, when you hit that low and the precipitation arrives, it is entirely possible that a lot of those places will not see a flake or an ice pellet, and they will start off as just plain rain. That is, when you think about it, to be so bitter cold with all this Arctic air. And it goes right to the point that we've been making for days now, is that this high that is moving off the East Coast could have gone anywhere else, okay? The high could have gone just about anywhere else as it moved out, and it would have bought you some time. It would have maybe brought you a front-end thump. It might even have brought you a front-end thump of size. But the high went to the one place where it not only keeps, pretty much ruins that concept certainly for the coastal areas, but it also creates an upside down situation where all the cold air dams down the central and southern Appalachians. So it's going to be cold and snowing and icy in those areas down to the south that normally would be raining in a case like this, and where those areas up to the northeast are going to wind up in, in rain and temperatures probably climbing up into the 40s along the coastal plain.
I have no question. I think for me, the temperature will reach to at least 40 on Monday early in the day, and maybe even in some spots in lower Westchester, lower Hudson Valley, 45, 46. Much too warm for any kind of hope for any kind of significant snowfall. But you're right. And if this thing were maybe right now, it looks like, Joe, the storm is going to be tracking up near Williamsport, Pennsylvania, from eastern North Carolina tomorrow evening to Williamsport by Monday morning. And so we're simply on the wrong side, the warm side of the storm. And again, if this were a matter of a couple 100 miles further to the east, yeah, then we'd be looking at a potential burial situation. But we're not going to be seeing that here. As I said, here in Putnam Valley, couple, maybe 3 inches, then a little bit of ice on top, and then we pour down the rain, maybe a half to 1 inch. And on top of all of that snow, however light it may be, it's going to be a real mess on my driveway and many roadways, and especially the secondary ones come Monday morning.
We got a ton of winter weather advisories up, and actually a ton of winter storm warnings up from Arkansas and northern Mississippi, northeastern Alabama, across northern Georgia. I think, with the exception of 2 counties in northwest Georgia that are under winter weather advisories. And if you notice, there are a couple of holes in a few places. In southeastern Tennessee, and if you've ever driven down down I-81, coming down Virginia, and then when you go into the Tennessee for a bit, there are you're kind of in between mountains, so you wind up into these shadow zones. So depending on the wind direction, those areas wind up. You could see big snow amounts on the east side of those slopes, but on the west side, where the wind is northerly or even northwesterly, the snow dries up in the downslope. So that's why you see this kind of hole here in southeastern Tennessee where there's no advisories up, and then you go back to winter storm warnings in northern Georgia because you've got the mountainous terrain. So that's why, if you're wondering why some spaces are missing. Another example of that, by the way, is in the Hudson Valley from for example, Putnam and Orange counties are in a winter weather advisory, as is everybody west of the Hudson River. But east of the Hudson River, Dutchess County, Columbia County, and I believe one other county further north, Albany has not put up an advisory yet because, again, there might be some kind of shadow effect given the wind direction. And of course, we've got advisories up in northwest Connecticut, northern Massachusetts, except in the east. Rest of the Connecticut is quiet. Now, the Weather Service may wind up adding a few more winter weather advisories tomorrow morning. They just saw fit to put up the ones they needed to put up early, and then sometimes they wait till late to see if they got to add a few around the edges. But winter storm warnings, western New York, western Pennsylvania, down through West Virginia, most of Virginia except the eastern part of the state, western and central North Carolina, advisories in the eastern part of the state. And the further east you go, the issue is probably going to be more ice than anything else. Ice storm warnings in central South Carolina, Joe. Accretion rates of a half to 3/4 of an inch of ice accretion forecast there. And in northwestern South Carolina, it's winter storm warnings for ice and snow or a combination thereof. Same goes for North Georgia. So, yes, the storm is not going to have a huge impact on the big cities. But north and west of the big cities, this is it's an interesting, sizable system that we've had. It's the third major weather system that we've had in less than 2 weeks. So I think that kind of qualifies the pattern we're in, Joe, as a very active one.
Oh, no question. No question about that. And Joe, we're talking about the snow and the ice and all that sort of stuff, but let's also talk about the wind, because the winds are going to be rather potent, especially along coastal sections tomorrow night. And we have that big full moon on Monday, which means that even without a storm, the tides would be a bit higher than normal. Now add in the storm, and we could be looking at lots of coastal flooding for especially the south shore of Long Island, the Sound Shore of Westchester, coastal Connecticut, where we could even see a little bit of beach erosion as well.
Yeah, the high tide, late Sunday night, early Monday morning, in and around Long Island. The Weather Service with their coastal flood watch, they got that with a moderate risk of coastal moderate coastal flooding expected, and that makes sense. We have a full moon this weekend, do we not?
We have it on Monday.
Monday, so that's close enough. The tides are rising into that full moon, so uh, the storm couldn't have timing out this way. It's always a problem. You get that new moon, you get the full moon, and you get a storm coming up the East Coast with an onshore wind. And yeah, I think there's going to be about a 6 to 8 hour stretch late tomorrow night, but particularly tomorrow night for Long Island and into early Monday morning in southeastern New England, where there are going to be some gusts, I think, to 40 to 50 or even higher.
No question. I think 40 will be the low end, and we may very well hear before this is all over of places that are in the 50 to 60 mile per hour range. Worst part of this will probably be in the overnight hours tomorrow night. So there may very well be in some places some power outages because of this. And by the way, I won't say what electric company provides my electricity, but they do send out
for fear
advisories.
they may hunt you down and shut you off.
Well, I'm not going to. Yeah. Well, anyway, I'm not going to even give them any publicity. But what they sent out a special statement via email to me this evening to alert me that Winter Storm Izzy is on the way.
I saw that somewhere else. Can we just stop this already? Really? Is it just stop it? It's not necessary. That's the thing about this that drives me crazy, Joe. There's no need to. This is purely a marketing scheme by the Onion of Weather, and that's fine if that's what they want to do it. But it's just. The Weather Service doesn't refer to these storms by those names that are done by non-government companies and all the rest of it. And I don't think it's something that other companies should be doing, taking the brand of someone, the brand off of another company. They're actually helping them make their money, so they should disclose that.
Right.
They need to disclose it. I think that should be disclosed.
So do I.
That they,
what are you going to do?
I know it's the sad world that we live in. The sad world. Which, by the way, if anybody out there wants to, has your emblem or your company logo, and you'd like us to wear them on our clothes, give us a call. We'll have a conversation. Right, Ray? You could wear the logo of a hair place.
I'm having trouble with my hair today because it is so cold and so dry that I'm getting a lot of static.
Oh,
I'm trying to brush my hair or whatever.
How can you
get the electrical shocks?
How can you live with static in your hair? Speaking of Izzy, the way, Izzy D.
We do have Izzy D. Yeah.
Yes, he hit super chat, and he wants me to look at the question he put up. Okay, Izzy, hang on a second. I'm doing 20 different things when I'm doing the show, so I'm not staring at the chat board waiting for your question. Just to remind you. I can't see your question, Joe. I don't know if you can find his question. I can't find it. So if you could put it up again, it would be most helpful. Thank you. In the meantime, was it Ruin Nation? I mean, I'm kind of curious because you said something to the effect of the fact that something being off with the models and not not quite. I guess not quite understanding. I lost your post here too, so I can't read it word for word. So I was trying to kind of understand where you were going with that, because I don't know that. I mean, I'm not seeing if I'm interpreting this correctly. I mean, the models have been pretty much on the line with this inland track since late Wednesday, Thursday. So I'm not sure what you think might be off. So if you could elaborate on that.
Izzy D asks, isn't it extremely unusual for air pressure systems to track up the spine of the Appalachians because they don't like terrain? And before you throw in your answer or comment about that, Joe, let me just point out that probably one of the most intense storms that we've ever seen in this part of the country, and this goes back now to November of 1950, was the Great Appalachian Storm, which not only broke all kinds of records in terms of abnormally low air pressure, but brought tremendous snows to places like central and western Virginia, West Virginia, western and central Pennsylvania. Tremendous winds as well. I think now parts of the tri-state area had winds gusting to maybe close to 100 miles an hour with that storm up the Appalachians in 1950.
Well, the other, what I would have just added to that is you could also make a case, I think, for the if you remember the 1993 superstorm, which came up just came up inland of the coast, but up the east side of the Appalachians, and never did redevelop. With the absence of any kind, you need some kind of blocking. I mean, you don't even need that much blocking, but you need something that forces a system to redevelop, and where the primary dies out and the secondary takes over further east. And if you look at the process of this particular storm, when it reaches up into northern Virginia, the surface lows kind of getting sucked up by the upper low. And getting underneath it, there actually is a secondary low that is trying to form, that's going to try to form right along the Jersey coast and move over Long Island, but it never really takes over because there's no mechanism to force the primary to just kind of come to a grinding halt, to fall apart and to die. So as a result, this one stays pretty much intact all the way up, and it certainly doesn't help the cause that the high's moving out the way it is. That is critical here. If there was some kind of higher pressures, even a small amount of higher pressure holding on in Maine or New Brunswick or back up into north of Vermont and New Hampshire, we'd be probably having a very different conversation right now with respect to this storm as far as the forecast is concerned. But we don't have that. Right. Okay, we've had a storm in the past that totally did the opposite of what the models say. I know we don't have too much blocking, but with all this cold air, it's a shame. Again, the high goes out to southeast of Cape Cod, and it not only goes out southeast of Cape Cod, it keeps going. So there's nothing to hold the cold air in once the high goes out, and the only place where it does hold in is in the central Appalachians southward, because they're getting a northerly wind with the low going east of the mountains, and the cold air that's there now essentially just gets trapped. And then eventually you get more cold air that's drawn in on the backside of the low and the upper low when that goes by. So they're in a much better spot with all of this, considering how this is evolving synoptically. But for the coastal plain, no. It's all west and north of the big cities, all west and north of I-95. So it's all fine and dandy to have all this bitter cold Arctic air, but when this ocean storm on Friday wound up going up the Davis Strait instead of out to the east, and just basically forcing the blocking high south of Greenland instead of building westward to shift eastward, that happened over a couple of model runs back last Wednesday. That was the end of it. That was the end of all of this. And in spite of the fact that there was all of this nonsense after that on Thursday, particularly about the ensembles. Oh, the ensembles are further east and blah, 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 and so on and so forth. No. Joe, my argument was very simple on Thursday. I could, if even one of the global models was holding on to a coastal track, I could have said, okay, my mind is open. I'll keep the door open that it's not going to track to the west. But when all three of them just zeroed in on a coastal track, that was the end of it. And the other thing is, with the high going out the way it is, that also pretty much ended the idea of this, of a front end thump. It's a shame for snow lovers. I get it. There's a ton of cold air. You don't see, we said it earlier. It's going below zero in a lot of spots just north and northeast of New York City. It's low single digits to near 10 everywhere else. And there are places that are going to be that low, and 12 hours later, when it starts to precipitate, they won't see a flake or an ice pellet. I mean, that's a sin. That's like a snow lover's sin. Oh, God. I got the snow map up, and then I'm going to address Marion Gabrielle, who is, I believe, I'm assuming where was that question? I just saw it about Atlanta, about the high wind warning. Boy, I'm sorry, but I'm just like having a lot of trouble tonight. Oh, there it is. Because she asked, when was the last time Metro Atlanta was under a high wind warning? I think you got to go back to one of the tropical storms or hurricanes a couple of years ago. I forget which one, where I remember the whole state of Atlanta was basically under a tropical storm warning, which is sort of the equivalent of a high wind warning. But it's been a while. But I will review that in a moment. In the meantime, Joe, the snow amounts. The Weather Service has been kind of nudging amounts back a little bit from what they started out with just a couple of days ago. I think the map tonight makes a lot of sense. I showed you my early call from Thursday, and it was it was in a lot of cases, a lot of this was actually still less than what the Weather Service has today. But I think this makes sense. They're not going for big amounts north and west of New York City and north and east of New York City. You really have to go further up the Hudson Valley. And the jackpot winner is going to be the western half of Pennsylvania, west of State College, Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh, Altoona. Probably going to wind up with the 10 or 12 inches. And the big jackpot winner is southwestern New York, Buffalo, Rochester, the foot line near Syracuse. They're going to probably get 12 to 20 inches in western and southwestern New York out of this, and it's not even lake effect. So that's where with the track the way it is, those are the big snows. And of course, we're seeing it also down the spine of the Appalachians into Virginia with some 10-inch plus amounts. Johnny Questland might do pretty well for you. And further south, trying to pull up some of the numbers here. Again, elevation drives the equation. Asheville itself at 4, but the mountains surrounding Asheville could get a foot plus. Same for some of the mountains in northeastern Georgia. They got a 1-inch print for Atlanta, Joe. If they get measurable snow in Atlanta, it will be the first time in 4 years that they've gotten measurable snow.
Right. That would go back to that disaster that they had 4 years ago, I think, where they issued a winter storm watch, and then they issued for Atlanta a winter weather advisory, and everybody thought, well, that's much lower on the scale as opposed to a winter storm watch. And in other words, a lot of people in Atlanta felt, oh, we're not going to get much of anything, when actually, in turn, what they ended up getting was not just snow, but also snow and ice. Nobody was prepared for it, and all of Atlanta was like literally paralyzed for hours. Nobody could go anywhere in Atlanta, and it led to a lot of discussion in the aftermath as to exactly how they could improve warnings and watches and advisories in and around the Atlanta area. And you want to know what, Joe? After all of that talk, I don't think a single thing has changed in 4 years. That they still are using the same advisories, the same watches, the same warnings, and I don't know.
They did brine the roads today. Believe it or
That's
not,
good.
they brined the roads.
That's
so good. It's not actually the other morning, because was it yesterday morning, I think, or the morning before? No, it was yesterday morning. When I had to leave early because I had to run out to the doctor's office. The roads here in the early morning hours, because we get the fog in the mountains, and the temperatures that go down into the 20s. So obviously it freezes on anything, including road services. surfaces, but I actually passed a truck that was spreading sand out on the roads, which really surprised me because I didn't think they did that sort of thing up here. But they did brine the roads. They know they brined all the interstates down near Atlanta. By the way, on their weather service site, I'm in the purple area up in the northeastern part of the state. They're going 4 to 8 inches of snow with quarter of an ice plus a quarter of an ice accumulations. And what I hope I don't see are wind gusts of over 50 miles an hour because there's a lot of trees down here. If they're ice covered, I don't want to lose power because I'll be stuck up here. The Atlanta, they're actually in the zone where they're going for up to 2 inches of snow and ice and a quarter of an inch of strong wind gusts. The key to the forecast throughout much of the deep south is going to be the track of the upper low. That is front and center what is going to drive snow amounts because the upper low is where the upper low tracks along and north of the upper low by about, say, 50 to 70 miles. That area is going to get underneath what could be a potential little comma head. And that's where you could wind up, I think, with some local surprises. And this is something that doesn't happen too often down here, but this is a very, Joe, I got the upper air, the 500 millibar map up on the GFS right now. I mean, this is a really wrapped up upper low that dives down into southern Alabama and then lifts up into central Georgia. It's actually tracking on the last few runs. It's actually been tracking a little bit further to the south, which I think adds helps the cause for people who in northern Mississippi, northern Alabama, to also be part of this with regards to accumulating snows. And then, of course, it gets really wrapped up when it gets into western North Carolina and in central Virginia. And then take the track all the way up into southeastern PA, and from there to Albany. You would have needed the upper load, would have had to have tracked, and you've got that other short wave that you're back in the Great Lakes that's diving down and picking it up. This upper low, if you wanted it to produce big snows for the coastal plain, you would have wanted to see it go off the coast near, say, southeastern Virginia and take a track just southeast of Atlantic City to maybe near Cape Cod, right in there. That would have put the coastal areas in a jackpot zone. It would have created an entirely different synoptic scenario as far as what the weather maps would have looked like for Sunday and Sunday night into Monday in the Northeast. But the bottom line is that the features are just too far west. The upper low is too strong and too far west, which is why you're not going to get a coastal low out of this.
Now we have a Joe and Joe scheduled for our normal Sunday morning, 11 a.m. time tomorrow. However, if I'm incorrect here, correct me. But you're going to be pretty much in the thick of things. That may be very close to the worst part of the storm for you, right about that time.
Yes. Yes.
So we're hoping that we'll be doing a Joe and Joe.
Yeah, well, that's just it. I mean, keep your fingers crossed that I can hold on to power. It hasn't gone down in a while, so I'll use that as a plus. But yeah, if that is through the thick of it, the worst of it for me is going to be probably from mid-morning tomorrow into tomorrow night. So you probably get all kinds of precip and then go to all snow. Let's keep our fingers crossed that we've got some power. That I got some power. Oh, and by the way, Joe, just want to say, welcome to all of you who are watching tonight. We've got over 500 viewers on here at once, which is great, and 102 likes. Thanks very much for joining us. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button with your Gmail account, and you can get you'll get notifications every time we do the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is we're on 5 days a week, and when we have storms around, sometimes we're on 6 or 7. Keith James II. Wanting to know what the temperature in Buffalo is for the game tonight. Hey, Joe, can you check the temperature in Buffalo right now and see what it is?
Sure.
Thanks for hitting the Super Chat tip jar. Most appreciated. Izzy D, you hit the Super Chat tip jar, and there's one other person that hit the Super Chat tip jar. I got to watch which consonant I use. I don't want to set off the algorithms. But there's one person here who hit it, and I can't see who it is. So we got Izzy, we've got Keith James, and there's one other person. So whoever you are, other person, thank you very much.
Now they're playing are they playing an NFL playoff game tonight? The wild card game, I guess. Am I correct on that, or?
Yes, tonight's a wild card game, and yeah.
All right, it's 6 degrees in Buffalo right now.
6. So sort
the
of
wind is from the wind is from the northeast at 8. The barometer is 30.42. The dew point is -2. 10-mile visibility, and when you factor the wind in, the chill factor makes it feel, if you're right out there right now watching that football game, it's feeling more like 7 degrees below zero.
Wow.
Yes.
Not quite the ice bowl the Giants played Green Bay in back how many years ago that was. Amari and Gabrielle, I have no idea when the last time Metro Atlanta was under a high wind warning. I've seen them with the wind advisories a few times, but I don't honestly, I don't remember when the last time. And there's no way for me to look that up. You'd have to contact the Weather Service office there directly and ask them to get an answer to that question. So I can't tell you. All right, so looking at the GFS, the new GFS, because I know the snow lovers they're already salivating over the end of next week, but we'll get to that a little bit later. But here's your low. You can see what happens down in the south with the upper low when you have, kind of borderline cold air. All right, so I'm being told that your mic, Joe. Well, he says, please have Joe fix his mic. Okay. There's two Joes here. There's two Joes here. So which Joe is too loud and which Joe is too soft? Talk to me, Joe Rayo.
Well, I don't know, Joe, which one of us is too soft.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. My levels here look fine. I don't know if anybody else is having that. If you're having that same issue, please let me know. But I'm seeing my audio levels fine. My dial is set correctly, so I'm not hot. So Joe sounds fine to me through here. So if anybody else is having, if anybody else having audio issues, can you just kind of let me know? Steve Lapointe. Hitting super chat. We're 50 likes away from 200. Thank you, Steve. Most appreciated. So anyway, here's the GFS. Let me run through this, and we'll take a look.
We have 600 people watching, Joe.
I know, isn't that great? That's awesome.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Thank you all.
Thank you. Will Tennessee says we both sound fine. All right, so the guy's just obviously trolling. There's your low sitting near Hagerstown. Look how far left this wound up going. And you've got 1,000 isobars there along the coast from New Jersey to Long Island. We're going to blow away on the coast tomorrow night. The low runs up into northeastern Pennsylvania. You can see where the heavy snow is going. It's like western New York, western PA. The rain, Joe, the thing about this is we're going to have east winds, and we may go southeast over 45 and 50-degree ocean water and more. And that's the thing about how far the rain gets in tomorrow. I think it gets in, it gets in faster. The warmer air gets in faster, especially at the low levels. The 850 may stay cold for a much longer period of time. But that bottom 1,500 feet of the atmosphere is going to go in a hurry with that wind. That's been sticking in my mind for days with respect to that. And then, of course, the low is gone by Monday morning. It's all pretty much done with, and then it turns colder and drier after that.
Yeah, according to the 18Z NAM-FUS at LaGuardia, at 7 a.m. on Monday morning, we have a thickness not overly high. It's at 544. But what kills this for snow lovers is that the bottom layer, the boundary layer, the T1 level, is at +8 degrees Celsius. And I don't
But
care where you're from and how low the thickness might be. When you got +8 at the T1 level, that's just that's just too warm. And
yeah,
even by the way, up at Albany at that hour, the T1 is at +1, and they have a 546 thickness. So I would maintain that that means that it's raining even as far north as Albany by 7 o'clock on Monday morning.
I think you're going to see the rain snow line push up. Uh, uh, Again, when you look at the upper features, it's cold. The 850, the 700, and beyond. But it's that bottom couple of thousand feet, that screaming east southeast wind. There's a total lack of snow cover now. As you know, that's another thing. We were talking before the show went on the air, that if we had any kind, because you said you were at what, 8 degrees or 6 degrees or whatever it was, if we had
Right.
any
It's
kind of,
7 now.
yeah, I mean, if we had say 6 inches of snow cover on the ground with a high like this, my God, we would be going below. The temperatures would be easily 5 to 10 degrees lower when we go through the overnight, and we'd be waking up tomorrow morning with readings 0 or below in many places, places that maybe didn't get below 0 very often in this sort of setup. That might have set the table a little differently for tomorrow, at least for a little while. But you've got nothing. You've got nothing holding. The cold air I think is just going to get scoured out in a hurry. Let me just acknowledge, by the way, Ken Musillo hitting super chat tonight. Thank you, Ken. Alexandria Downey asking, is there a chance for power outages in southern New England? Well, I mean, right along the immediate coast to get some gusts of 40 to 50 miles an hour for about 4 or 5 hours. I mean, I don't, I'm not good at forecasting power lines going down or closing schools, but I would think that there would be some risk. And by the way, Joe,
It's
speak.
it's it's a it's a federal holiday, so schools will be
Yes,
closed
that's
on
right.
Monday.
By the way,
No.
speaking of risk, guess who's on the chat board right now? None other. Do you have a drum roll? I need a drum
I,
roll.
I
None
don't have a
other.
drum roll with me.
None other than the man who left his charm school graduate degree at the school itself and hasn't yet gone back to pick it up. Our old pal DT.
My goodness.
David Tolerus is on the chat board. I am so beyond flattered.
And it tells me I'm running out of battery power,
Yes.
so I have to plug it in here. Yeah. So.
DT
Oh
is
my goodness.
DT's on the chat board.
Hammer City, DT.
Yes.
Hammer City.
David, Prince Charming that you are, I was always willing to take the risk of putting you on this show with us, but you have rejected my open invitation. But I am a kind, big-hearted sort of person, so the open invitation always stands that we'd love to have you on our program so that we could have you in a conversation. It would be so enlightening. Actually, I'm teasing, Dave. We've gone at it back and forth over the last for a number of years, but it's very nice to see him on the board tonight. Maybe I'll unblock you if you behave yourself. Okay. Jay-Z Videography says, "Hey Joe and Joe, thanks for hitting super chat, Jay-Z. Most appreciated to hit the super chat tip jar." He asked Joe Rayo, what are the winds going to be like at Kennedy during the peak of this storm when it hits New York City? I have a buddy who's a pilot for Atlas Air Cargo who I believe will be arriving during this mess. Well, the strongest winds are probably going to be from I'm thinking from 10 o'clock tomorrow night until the early morning hours on, let's say, till about 6 or 7 a.m. Monday morning. And I'm guessing that right along the immediate coast, we'll probably see some gusts up to 50, maybe even a little bit higher.
Yes.
Joe, you don't have a problem with that. I mean, it sounds like you're on the same page with
No.
me as far as that's concerned.
No, I'm looking at the boundary. I'm looking at the 18Z boundary level winds on the Foose, and conservatively now, I would say at JFK 40 to 50 from the east or east southeast, and it could even be higher than that. I think the peak is going to be sometime between 1 and 7 a.m. In fact, by 7 a.m., the winds may actually have turned from east southeast into the south, and may have actually dropped off a bit. But if you're going to be going anywhere tomorrow night late into the early hours of Monday morning, that's really when the winds are going to be rocking and socking, so to speak. And again, let's remind everybody: full moon on Monday, and if you're along the south coast of Long Island, the Sound Shore of Westchester, the coastline of Connecticut, at the time of local high tide, you may very well see moderate beach erosion, coastal flooding. It's going to be really rough out there in the late night hours tomorrow night.
By the way, we are at 199 likes. So if one person would take the number to make it go to 200, that would be terrific. I don't know about, let me just give you a general answer to questions about power outages and down power lines and all the rest of it. You know what? You're asking me to predict whether power lines and power outages are going down. Use common sense. If you're talking about, for example, and I'm not trying to single anybody out here, but I'm just going by the questions. So and weather, you're using the example in Raleigh-Durham of a quarter of an inch of ice at 40-mile-an-hour wind gusts. Well, you know what? If you've got if you have a power lines on some sort of structure that perhaps is compromised for whatever reason, or a little or susceptible to something happening, well, then those power lines are going down. Going to go down. So maybe your power company saying that it's low risk. That's quite possible. I don't know, but if given the circumstances of what you're dealing with, which are strong gusty winds and potential for a quarter of inch of icing or more, I would say that there's a chance that you could certainly see some power outages. And the same holds true for the forecast for Atlanta, for example, because I'm seeing that Mariah Gabrielle is asking a similar question. So common sense would say that under circumstances like this, there's probably going to be issues, and let's just leave it at that. Totally, I think that's a good way to answer it. I often get asked, Joe, and you and I used to get asked about whether the schools were going to close. I'm not a school district. I don't know what the criteria is for school district. And Joe and I will both tell you that the criteria for closing schools was a hell of a lot higher when we were kids than it is now. There's a puff of wind, and a flake of snow, and there's 2-hour delays for St. Paul's. I can't get my shoes wet school. So yeah. Who knows? Every school district is different. Everybody has a different standard of criteria here. Anyway,
my son, my daughter, and my daughter-in-law, all three of them are teachers, and they are all PO'd about the fact that they are losing a potential snow day to a holiday. They don't have to go and work on Monday because of Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and they're upset by that because they could have had a day off from this, but they're going to have the day off anyway because of the federal holiday. By the way, Joe, if you allow me to share my screen, I will bring up my snow map, and you can see what my
maybe I'll bring up mine too. If you're going to bring up yours, I'll bring up mine.
Yeah, we'll have a comparison here.
All right, so you can go ahead and share, and let me just. I got to switch two screens. I switched one. Let me switch the other, and then I'll bring up mine. I'll bring up both of mine because I actually have two. Hang on one second here. And oh, come on, what are you doing to me? I don't want this.
I don't know what I'm doing to you.
No, I'm just trying to. I have two screens on my software program that I use, and I keep punching up the wrong one. Okay, go. You're up. You're on the air.
Can you see what I've got? Or
I see it beautifully. I can't see. Right. You didn't go far enough south to Long Island, though, in New York City. It was there. You go.
There it is.
All right, you can scroll up and down. Okay, go ahead.
I'm trying to. Well, basically, I mean, for the city, for Long Island, most of coastal Connecticut, I'm calling for mainly rain. Now, this is not to say that all of you on Long Island or New York or coastal Connecticut won't see snow. The air is so cold and dry, and there's probably going to be just enough of it left as precip works its way in. I'm saying around 7, 8, 9 o'clock tomorrow night for a little bit of snow, but then a very quick change over to ice and then just plain rain. It's going to be mainly rain, not talking for any accumulation down across Long Island, coastal Connecticut, New York City. Then we start with maybe an inch of accumulation just across or inland from the sound shore of Westchester, and maybe a couple of inches in northern Westchester and southern sections of Putnam. We got 1 to 2 inches here, 2 to 4 inches across all of Orange County, into the northern and western part of Putnam, on up into Dutchess County, and then 4 to 6 for places like, let's say Sullivan County, the northern end of Ulster County, and the highest amounts on this map. And this is where the Catskills are. And I think that with elevation, as per Mr. Chiaffi talking about, he's up at a couple of thousand feet or more. If you head up toward the Catskills, I would not be at all surprised, in spite of that push of milder air coming in on east and southeasterly winds, that they may get a thump of 6 or maybe as much in the highest elevations, and maybe as much as 10 inches before any kind of a changeover, if any kind of a changeover occurs. And then 4 to 6 inches further north, up like toward Columbia County and on up toward Tim Veltman land, Albany, before even up there they change over to rain before daybreak on Monday morning, Joseph.
All right, now I'm going to show you my 2 maps because I actually was very tempted. I did an early call because I have a few snow removal guys that I work with during the winter months, and so I try to get things to them a little bit earlier. Usually, actually, as soon as I get it done for them, then it immediately goes on my my subscription platform on Patreon, and so I do what my usual policy is that I do an early call 72 hours before the start of the approximate start time. So that's why I did this Thursday. I did this Thursday morning because some areas I deal with are going to start Thursday, mid to late morning or early afternoon. And then then I do a final call, which I was going to wait to do it till tomorrow morning and do it. Then I looked at everything today and I was just like, how much is it really going to change between now and then? So I did the final call. But Joe, my early call is, let me see, did I put it up on the screen? No, I'm going to put the early call. Okay, I'm going to put the early call on the screen. And again, I did this Thursday morning. And I did this when I was being yelled at by a lot of people because of not looking at the ensembles and not looking at the shifting tracks to the east and all the rest of it. So my early call map, when I do it, I don't change it until I do the final call. So I don't look at model runs every 6 hours. Those of you who've been watching me for a long time know this. I don't look at models every 6 hours. If they go up and they go down, it's fine. But I stay with my initial impressions until we get to 24 hours ish before the start time, the actual start time, and then I go to final call. So my initial call, Joe, had rain in southeastern New England. I drew a line across Long Island to respect the North Shore that it might start out as snow, but everybody else rain. And from Staten Island right down right down through New Jersey, the coastal counties, and even into Southwest Jersey, I had mostly rain. I only had an inch of accumulation from southern Connecticut across northeastern New Jersey down to just north of Trenton, between say Trenton and Allentown, down to northern Delaware, just south of the Washington D.C. Baltimore area. The 2-inch line across Connecticut from Hartford to about Poughkeepsie to through Morris County in New Jersey to about Allentown, south and west to say Lancaster in Pennsylvania, and going north and west of Washington, Baltimore. The 4-inch line, you can see it northwestern Massachusetts, north of 84, like in central Dutchess County, and then coming in on the New Jersey, New York State, Pennsylvania triple point, and then kind of meandering its way down to just east of Harrisburg. And then I had an 8-inch line west of Harrisburg with 8 to 12 in the western half of Pennsylvania and on up through western and upstate New York. So that was my early call, okay? My final call, which I put out tonight, is actually not that much different than the early call. I just made some very minor adjustments to it. So what I did was I actually pulled the rain line a little bit further to the north. So Long Island starts as all rain. The coastal counties start as all rain. I kind of nudged that line in New Jersey actually a little bit further southeast. So I have Philadelphia and Trenton lying between nothing and an inch. And then the 1 inch line that goes up into northeast New Jersey kind of goes across Connecticut, Route 15. The 2 inch line, Reading to Allentown, um, Western Passaic County, southern Putnam County to just south of Hartford. The 4 inch line from Harrisburg to northwest of Allentown by a bunch of miles, northwest Jersey to southern Dutchess and going north and west of there. And then I increased the amounts in western New York and down in West Virginia to a foot plus with 8 to 12 in between in some of the shadow areas around Pittsburgh to Altoona. I think the one place where I may have overdone it is in the middle and upper Hudson Valley, Joe. I've got 8 to 12. I think I'm going to be too high. Timothy Veltman pointing out that the Weather Service there is only going for like 2 to 4, 3 to 5. So I don't know. I kind of took a stab at it when I was looking at some of the guidance to go a little higher. Again, every one of them, every snow forecast that's put out by any weather forecaster is never going to be 100% perfect. You're never going to get the lines exact. You try to hope that you get 3/4 of it perfect, and you could consider that a pretty good forecast. If you could get 90% of it perfect, that's even better. So I'm thinking I'm good in most of those places. That's the one zone that I'm a little suspect of because, if the rain snow line flies up to Albany, then yeah, it's going to probably be like 2 to 4, 3 to 5. But if for some reason it gets delayed up there and maybe the snow's a little more robust, we could wind up with some, maybe closer to my higher numbers. And we'll just leave it at that.
I got 4 to 6. I got 4 to 6, Joe. Now, if you and I take a consensus between your forecast and mine, we come up with about 6 to 9 inches. And yeah, that could very well be on a bit on the high side. But I could still see before a changeover in Albany, I could see the outside chance of maybe a half a foot, and then comes the sleet and the rain. And again, up in the Catskill area, I don't know if you take that into account or whatever, but in those high terrain areas up in the Catskill Mountain Park, I could see 7, 8, 9, 10 inches.
Oh yeah, I have them in that 8 to 12 zone. So they're in the 8 to 12 zone. No, absolutely. It's tough in New York State under certain circumstances because you've got mountains, but you also got valleys. Depending on how these storms are coming up, sometimes you get that shadow effect that happens east of the Hudson, and maybe that's this time around. That's what's going to happen. I think that's why Albany's got that big hole there with those 3 or 4 counties where it doesn't have advisories up. When you're trying to forecasting for how many hundreds of square miles you're going to have, or thousands of square miles, you are going to have. You're not going to get it perfectly. I'm familiar with the terrain of a lot of this area here in the northern Mid-Atlantic to southern New England, but I'm certainly not familiar with all of it. So I got to go by what people tell me with regards to people who live up in those areas that tell me what their personal experiences are. It's not easy. So like I said, if you can get 70 to 75% of it right, that's a good forecast. If you get 90% right, I would consider it that would be an exceptional forecast. By the way, 309 likes tonight. Thank you so much for those of you who hit the like button.
Wow.
Subscribe to my YouTube channel with your Gmail account, and you won't miss a Joe and Joe show because we're on 5 days a week, including, hopefully, without any glitches, tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Eastern time for our usual Sunday morning show. So we're very happy about that. I think
we talk about how the snow lovers are getting robbed here, unfortunately, with the track of the storm. But I think we're also getting robbed, Joe, because I suspect that if we had that storm further east out over the ocean, and if we were getting a sizable accumulation, Um, I think that we could have been heading for like maybe 800 or 1,000 viewers tonight, and it will happen.
Oh yeah.
It'll happen when we get that when we get one of those storms this winter, and I suspect that we may very well see one of those before the end of the winter. You folks who threw in the towel in December on winter, maybe you'll agree as well.
It did kind of turn on a dime though, didn't it?
Yep, it sure did.
I'm trying to
What is
find
Mar?
my U.S.
What is Mar?
satellite loop.
Now, what is Margliata Floroto? I sorry if I'm mispronouncing the name. Said multiply Joe Rayo's map by 3. I'm not.
He said always on the low end, and then gets mad when he's wrong. That you're being a little bit. You're just being a little bit hard on him, Margarita. He's not always he's not always wrong. See, Joe, I'm
Well,
defending
you
him.
know. Well, I said this before. If you've heard this story, I apologize. I have built up a reputation over the years of being a conservative forecaster, and as far as snow is concerned, you're not going to see me like some, I call them disaster forecasters, who go off the deep end and go for the highest possible amount. I try to play it down the middle, and sometimes I'll play it a little bit below the averages, but that's my way of doing things. But when on the occasion when there's a really a major storm on its way, I've seen on more than a few of these chat boards or these bulletin boards, these weather bulletin boards, people say this must be a big storm coming. Even Joe Rayo is going for a lot of accumulation,
Yeah.
and I suppose that pretty much tells you my how people look upon the numbers I put out. That if I'm going to go for it, then it definitely is going to happen, because Rayo always goes for a much lower amount than everybody else.
Oh, and by the way, she, unless I misread it, she also went after me. She says, I'm always on the low end, and then I get mad when I get it wrong. I'm not always on the low end, okay? Joe will attest to the fact that he can tell you for sure I'm not on the low. A lot of times I am not on the low end. So the thing.
Well, I mean, take a look at what we're just seeing right now.
Yeah,
I mean, like
today
we're talking about like places.
Today I'm on the low end because we deserve to be on the low end.
But what I'm saying, Joe, is that up to the north, up toward Albany, I mean, you're higher than I am.
Yeah.
So, I mean, of the two of us, you're high, I'm low.
Yes. Well, she apparently is upset with you because the last time, I love when people say, I was supposed to get 1 to 2 inches and ended up getting 6. So I don't know how accurate his map is. But you never, we don't know where you are. So I don't know how to verify what you say and what storm you're referring to. So,
and in regard to that, the 1 to 2, I wasn't the only one to go low, because if you remember, and we brought this up on Joe and Joe the night before the storm, the folks over at the Weather Prediction Center, who play it right down the line, they had, for the areas that I was calling for 1 to 2, they had something like a 10% chance of at least 4 or more inches. So they too were thinking along my lines of, like the amount of snow was going to be on the low side. So they blew it as well as I did,
right.
If you want to call it that. But you know what? I think everybody underperformed the last storm. Even those forecasters who went like 3 to 5 or 4 to 6, they underforecasted the last storm. That storm was an overperformer. So,
right, which we talked about at the last minute. Looked like it was turning into that. But look, the bottom line is, you know what? Maybe what you'd like is a zip code forecast so that we could give you a flake. If we could give you a flake count within, say, 25 snowflakes of how many fall right in front of your own house, that's probably the only way you'll be happy. I find people who reflexively, say things like that. That's exactly what they just do. They just do it reflexively. So anyway, we've spent enough time on that conversation defending ourselves. In the meantime, I've got the U.S. satellite loop, Joe, and you always look, you always want to see a good solid signature on the satellite. And I don't know about you, but I'm looking at this on the enhanced as we go into sundown, past sundown, of course. That is a really solid signature on the satellite that is moving across the deep south. That's a very impressive upper low that is swinging eastward, and that is what the the snow lovers across the south that are under winter storm warnings are banking on, is that upper low staying vigorous and taking a track a little bit further south into the Gulf states, so it leaves passes south of the northern half of, say, Mississippi, Alabama, but particularly Georgia, and into the western part of South Carolina. That is going to be producing snow and ice. And I know you don't want to root for ice because that's destructive, but it's funny down south here because there are a lot of people who really enjoy it when it snows because they like to see it because they know within a day or two it's all going to be gone. It's going to be mostly melted and it'll just go away without too much work. But and I get that. But what we don't want is ice. And by the way, Watershed 44 with regards to the icing for North Carolina, I'm going to bring up. Just give me a minute here. Let me bring the digital weather map again from the Weather Service because, some of the icing. I was looking at the NAM model, Joe. The NAM model in terms of icing that it's producing from just south of me across into South Carolina was on the order of a half to 3/4 of an inch of ice accretion. That is serious ice accretion if it verifies.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's and you know what? They've already had recently. They had a problem down there in terms of the amount of power outages and people who were in the dark for very long intervals of time. And that kind of ice accretion, Joe, can certainly cause significant power outage, widespread power outages. In fact, Renata is concerned for you, Joe. She's worried that you may have with the weather that you're anticipating that you may be out. We had a relative, a cousin of hers, in eastern Kentucky, and she's kind of like out in the rural zone, if you will. She was out for like 8 or 10 days. I can't even imagine or fathom being out of power for 8 or 10 days.
All right. Well, look,
you do have a generator, don't you? I hope.
I do not have a generator because they wanted $10,000. I got an estimate. They wanted Generac wanted $10,000 for me to put a generator to hook it up to my propane tank, and I just I'm not the horn of plenty, so I just I said you know what, not at this time, but should I run into some money, I may call you back one day, but my plan of attack is that if should something like that happen here, I'm not too far from the main road, so I'm just going to I'll just go on the main road and I'll head down to Marietta and go to my daughter's house. So that'll be okay. I also, by the way, happened this week. I had trouble with both. I have a dual heating system, so I've got electric for heat. And my electric bill, by the way, was $74, just so you know. But I got electric for heat. But when the temperature outside goes below 40 degrees, my propane tank the heating system switches over to the propane tank and heats. But I was having trouble with the propane part of the heating system because the fans in the house, in the vents, weren't coming on. So I was feeling the heat, but the heat wasn't blowing out. So my house wasn't getting heated up. So anyway, it was a very minor fix. And I took care of that today. And my fireplace, the ignition box, because I have a propane fireplace now. I'm too old to split wood. So anyway, I had to have that replaced, which was also a minor fix. So I had those 2 minor fixes done. My heating system is working. So fingers crossed that I don't have power outages or trees down, because that would obviously cause a problem. I really hope that there's a minimal amount of ice over me, and they're forecasting between 5 and 15 hundredths of ice accretion. So I'm thinking they're probably going more snow at my elevation rather than icing. So that's a plus. But I've got the map up in terms of some of the forecast ice accretion amounts. Now, on the plot, it's a little bit difficult because you're seeing basically the major cities, but you don't see places in between. But if you go to the individual Weather Service offices, you'll see that they're putting up numbers, between half and 3/4 of an inch in many places, particularly in north central South Carolina, on the on the edge of the mountains, south and east of Greenville, but well north of Columbia, and that area could potentially get hit fairly hard, and also into North Carolina, into Greensboro, 1/4 of an inch ice accretion, Charlotte, a little over 1/3 of an inch of ice accretion being forecast. But certainly think that there are going to be areas in that zone there that are going to wind up with maybe a half an inch of ice accretion or more. And that could be, that's going to be problematic, particularly if there's some wind involved.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the ice is the absolute worst. It is by far and away
ice is
the
evil,
absolute
Joe.
worst.
Ice is evil. That's kind of how I look at it. There's nothing. I mean, when you're inside looking outside, and you see it wrapped up on the trees and everything else, and you sort of can get into a bit of awe over the beauty of it, and I kind of understand that to an extent. But the minute you walk outside and you put your foot down on it, and you better remember that first step or the second step could lead you to a broken leg or a broken ankle, or a broken a broken arm or wrist or whatever. Plus the fact that if you're in a wooded area like me, and you hear a little bit of wind going on, and all of a sudden you hear a crash because some branch broke off, and it comes crashing down. So you really be careful what you wish for, because you really don't want that. You really don't. I always preferred just wipe me out with the foot. I'd rather have 2 feet of snow on the ground to deal with than to deal with ice.
Didn't Alan break his leg in an ice situation about 20 years ago?
Well, that was icing in front of the radio station, which he could have sued and owned, but didn't. But that's a conversation for another day. But it was on the ground. They hadn't cleared it, and he fell and he broke his leg. So I had actually run down to New Jersey to 1015 for a week or so, and actually do the weather there from the studios. So I was filling in for him. Yep, that was a lot of fun. And by the way, I pulled up the ice accretion up for the Hudson Valley, mostly under 1/10 of an inch being forecast. The same goes for Northwest Jersey, down into Southeastern PA. There's a 3700s here. They've got winter storm warnings up for 2 counties in Northeastern PA, Monroe and Carbon, and probably has to do with some of the mountains there, because there's a 3700s peak that they're forecasting. Down north and west of Washington, D.C., Baltimore, between 1 and 2/10. You get into Virginia, not a whole heck of a lot, mostly either in hundredths or maybe up to a tenth to at most a 1/4 of an inch in some places. And then, as I said, you get into the bigger numbers further to the south.
So what else do we have? What else could we cover here, Joe?
You know what?
We've been going like an hour and 15 minutes here so far.
You know what? We can't forget the fact that we've got severe weather risk. Severe weather risk, Joe, believe it or not. We have, with this very, very vigorous upper low, we're seeing tonight, we have a marginal risk from right along the immediate Gulf Coast, from southern Mississippi, southern Alabama, the Florida Panhandle, and kind of whipping around down the coast of the west coast of Florida, with a slight risk of severe weather tucked in there. And then the risk area tomorrow will shift to coastal North Carolina, where we have a marginal risk, and most of Florida, except for the Panhandle and the northernmost part of the northeasternmost part of the state, the rest of the peninsula is under a marginal risk, and I would not be surprised if we wind up seeing a slight risk of severe weather being added to the area that you see down in Florida. And I'll pull up the NAM. I'll pull up the NAM model, and we can just take a look at. As I noticed that the NAM, particularly the NAM 12, was showing a really good-looking squall line, very healthy-looking squall line moving.
Wasn't somebody on the chat board when we had Andy here on Thursday from North Carolina asking about that? And you were telling him about that possibility of severe weather.
Yeah, no, we did. In fact, the new NAM is out. It's out only 9 hours. The surface low is somewhere in southern Alabama, but tomorrow morning at 4 a.m., there is a healthy-looking squall line from South Georgia down through the Florida Panhandle, somewhere near Pensacola, and then the line extends out into the Gulf of Mexico. And if I go, and also from the cold wedge that is wedging down the Appalachians, it's snowing by me supposedly at 4 a.m. That's early on the new run. That could be a reflection of the system's, recent runs with the upper lows moving a little bit further to the south. But here is the 18Z run, Joe, and I'm just going to run through that. Squall line is actually quite healthy, moving across Florida tomorrow between 10 a.m. and noon to reaching the coast near Fort Lauderdale, Miami, around say 2 or 3 o'clock, and then moving offshore. And then you can see the heavy thunderstorms that form on the northern end in North Carolina, with the low in eastern North Carolina. Very strong thunderstorms from the low center out across the Outer Banks, northeastern North Carolina into southern Virginia, and then carrying on its way through the coastal waters. So, the upper features certainly would dictate the possibility that there could be, the marginal risk, I think, is justified. And again, who knows? They may wind up nudging it up to a slight risk. So we'll have to see on that. And by the way, I'll bring up. Go ahead, Joe. I'm going to switch a map.
Somebody on the chat board is asking about Mike. If I care to comment about the 18Z for next weekend, and I'm presuming he's talking about the 18Z's GFS, which the 12Z, the primary run, had a storm system approximately 300 or 400 miles east of Cape Hatteras and not touching anybody. And the 18Z run, Joe, I don't know if you looked at it. This would be for 12Z next Saturday.
I did see
it. That's the 162-hour. That's 6 3/4 days from now, and they have what looks to be a full-fledged major mid-Atlantic and southern New England snowstorm. Hey, look, that's like more than 5 days out, more than 6 days, almost 7 days out. It's an intermediate 18Z run. It's going to change. I don't put much stock in the intermediate 18 or 6Z runs. Come back on Thursday or Wednesday or Thursday next week. If it's still showing that on the primary run, the 12Z run, then we can talk. But right now, let's. I will
just say this: on the long range, given the upper air pattern, the models for the last several days have been sort of hinting at something coming out from that area, and I'll bring up the GFS here, and then of course, in typical GFS fashion, we get into that sort of middle range of the forecast period, say from day 6 to day 9, where this day 10 or somewhere in there, where the system disappears, and then it winds up reappearing. And I think that's kind of what we might be seeing here today, where it's back up, and who knows, at 0Z it might be gone. I think the upper air, given the fact, just looking at the overall pattern, which I think is a fair thing to do, even though it's in the long range. Forget about the specifics for a moment, but if you look at the upper air pattern, there is troughing that is going to be dropping down into the eastern part of the United States. And in particular, on this run, the GFS got very vigorous once again with a very strong southern feature. The European, by the way, has something rather similar to this. But I want to just go back to what we went through, because if you remember, with this system happening today, if we go back a week ago, we were looking at a situation where it looked as if it was going to get squashed out underneath us, given what was going on upstream in the North Atlantic and given what was going on upstream up in central Canada down into the northern plains. Perhaps we are in the same boat here again, where the pattern is not exactly the same, but those of you who have heard me over the years have said the trend is your friend. And whilst history doesn't repeat itself, it certainly has a tendency to rhyme. So maybe what we're seeing here is a bit of a rhyming situation. We're at a point right now where the models are dealing with a lot of energy running around in all sorts of different places. I can see how something could happen next weekend. Okay. Now, whether it happens the way the GFS shows or if it happens something different, I don't know. But I think the upper air is certainly busy enough, and with the troughing in the east, that we can say that I certainly wouldn't rule out the possibility that we could wind up seeing some sort of system. And by the way, just looking at, since the North Atlantic was such a big player this last time, I'm looking at the fact that we don't have any blocking to speak of because the system on Monday and Tuesday, it's kind of funny, Joe. You got a blocking high that's starting to build back to Greenland, and the system that's coming up the coast now is going to actually wreck that block and push it eastward over toward the Azores. But there's a deep trough that's coming down behind it as well, and that's going to, if that verifies, and that means that following whatever happens this weekend, regardless of whether we get anything or not, it's likely to turn bitter cold for the week starting Sunday, January 23rd, or around January 23rd or the 24th. It's going to get very cold in the eastern part of the eastern part of the United States. That's been, the models have been telegraphing in the long range now for the better part of the last 2 weeks, and I think that's going to happen.
And on the day 4 to 7 winter weather outlook, just for, again, going back to next Saturday, they do, admittedly, they being at the Weather Prediction Center, they do have from Boston through New York down to Washington, I might add, and across much of Virginia, a 10 to 30% chance for the probability of exceeding a 1/4 inch liquid equivalent of snow and sleet for next Saturday at 12Z. So if you're looking ahead, or you're looking with a hopeful sign for something to happen next Saturday, at least the forecasters over at WPC somewhat agree with you. They're at least mentioning that possibility, small as is.
Hey, you know what? I got to tell you, Joe, and I think it's worth noting. They nailed this weekend back in their last long range. And WPC, in spite of all the model gyrations that we saw, was pretty bullish in their long range for this particular event. So I think on the whole, they did a fairly good job here with having that storm show up in their longer range outlooks. So they got the risk zone up there. I would give that some attention. Certainly would put it in the back of my mind that they have it, they have it on their radar.
Okay, so we'll keep an eye on it. And like I said, if we still have this, let's say by somebody says I have low mic levels here. If we have it still on the radar by Wednesday or Thursday of this upcoming week, then we'll get excited again. But let's take them one at a time, starting with the problematic forecast for tomorrow night.
Are you on your Bluetooth?
Yes, I am.
Is your microphone up to the front of you or over to the side?
It's off. Well, I mean, it's where it usually is on my headset.
Okay, but
I'm coming in low.
No, my levels say you're okay, but just when you moved it just now, it actually your levels did go up. So, so you sound okay.
Right.
See my MAK. DT says, see my MAKRS in the chat. Okay. Where is it? Dave. I'm looking for it. So he says, Dave said, the problem is what this current system looked like 7 days ago. Last Sunday, it appeared that the northern shortwave was not going to drop, correct, into Missouri, and that the two pieces of energy were not going to phase. There's just no way to know if the two pieces of energy don't phase. You end up having you end up with a big East Coast snowstorm. But if they do phase, it's snow to rain again for the I-95 snows. Absolutely correct. If we do wind up with another situation where we've got multiple short waves running around and, you get something to come down from the north and it phases with another vigorous system that's in the southern stream, yeah, you're right. You're going to wind up with another snow to rain event. So, you want that sort of delicate balance where, maybe the northern stream shortwave comes down and just kind of acts as a kicker or levers the system ahead of it just enough where it lifts up to the northeast and passes just south and east of the coastline, keeping some cold air in. Then you're talking a different scenario. I totally agree with that, and I think we're probably looking at a similar. It's not going to be exactly the same, but the flavor of what's being shown on the upper air is similar to what we have now. So watch. We're in that zone here, Joe, and I think you've pointed it out with what you said. Today's Saturday. Probably from now through at least Wednesday, we could see a lot of jumping around as models, react to what these short waves actually look like in reality as we get closer. So you don't put stock in any one run. And I would just add to that, by the way, if I were looking for a storm in the long range, I always feel a whole lot better. Let me put it like this. I feel a lot better with the European keeping it to the south and east now, as rather than show what the GFS did today, 6 days out, where it's got almost a perfect storm track coming up the East Coast for a snowstorm for the I-95 cities, because the chances of that being right are slim to none at 156 hours out. So I almost would rather have it. I would actually rather have it off. Have the model not show a snowstorm, but just show hints of things this far out than actually show them in its view of reality. Oh, and there's your risk area, correct?
That's right. This is from the Climate Prediction Center, who I might add, and to go along with what you said, Joe, the CPC people had much of the Northeast in line for the possibility of a significant snowfall. Well, that's not going to happen for the folks in the I-95 corridor and points east, but for places west, yeah. And now we're talking about next weekend. Here it is, slight risk in this zone here for possible heavy snow from the 22nd to the 24th of January. So this is what we've been talking about
Right.
for the last few minutes, and that's what they're outlining.
And you look at where they outlined it in terms of the geography. That would argue for something more of a phased look than an unphased look. If it's going to show, if
Yes.
there's that's an argument for a phased look, not an unphased look. So a lot to watch in the coming days. Hey, look, the bottom line is we've had 3 storms in less than 2 weeks. We're in a very active period. We have cold air masses that are getting delivered down on a regular basis, and that's likely to continue through the next couple of weeks. There will be chances along the way, and likely to be disappointments along the way. And by the way, is this a new risk area from the 23rd to the 25th?
This is, and I went to check this twice because I don't think I ever remember them actually putting a high risk, but this is for a high risk of low temperatures, of very low temperatures from the 23rd to the 25th. You said, Joe, a few moments ago about the pattern loaning itself to creating abnormally cold weather as we move on toward the end of the month. Well, WPC, or actually the climate prediction guys and gals, are saying that, and this includes New York City, and this includes Washington and Philadelphia, and this whole area, in fact, a high risk of unusually cold temperatures from the 23rd to the 25th. That's next weekend.
How far south does that go? I'm curious. Oh, right.
How about
right down to me.
Right up down to you. Right down to you.
But,
and then this zone is moderate, and just a slight going all the way back to the nation's midsection: Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas. So they are making the allusion to a very cold stretch of weather coming our way for the final week of January.
And by the way, we are 24 likes away from 400 as we just passed the 9 o'clock hour, 9:01. So if you can nudge that up to 400 likes, then Joe and I can very happily say goodbye.
In other words, folks, we ain't leaving until we get to 400.
If you so while we're waiting to go to 400, since the new NAM is coming out, even as we speak, even as we beg for 400 likes, Joe, let's take a look. It's out only to 20 hours, but I'm curious because this is this is going to be during tomorrow and during our show at 11 o'clock Eastern time. So I'm going to bring it up on the screen. Give me a moment. I have to remember to bring some water with me when we do these shows, because if you're talking for an hour and a half, I'm getting to the point right now where my throat is starting to get very dry. But here we go. So there's your upper low. This is the new NAM. Again, only out to 20 hours. This right now we're looking at 2 a.m. and the upper low tracks across southern Alabama, starts to make the turn into north central Georgia. Looks like the upper low is centered right over Atlanta or just north of Atlanta. Extremely vigorous looking, by the way. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 contours cut off. 537. It's like a 531 upper low. You don't see 531 upper lows very often that far south. You just don't see it. So let's get.
Wait a minute. Now this is the 12Z, the 12 kilometer.
This is the 12 kilometer now.
I don't even dare to wonder what the 3 kilometer is showing.
All right, we'll take a look. I got snow all over me. This is at 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. We're now after 25 hours. So I want to see what the NAM does. So actually, it actually has snow here by me at 2 a.m. Goes to rain, and then it's ice in South Carolina, North Carolina, snow in western North Carolina. The surface low is right on the Alabama-Georgia line, pretty far south. And then
look at that skinny squall line, man.
This very impressive squall line here that for this time of year anyway, moving across the state of Florida tomorrow morning, and then over eastern Florida, the southeastern Florida tomorrow afternoon. I think they're going to go to a slight risk here tomorrow in parts of South Florida with this line. If you ask me. But there's your low. There's the snow on the backside. Pretty impressive looking, especially up in Kentucky and into Tennessee, and even for Georgia. I mean, you've got snow down south of Atlanta here, and it continues into tomorrow evening. So this is as far as we go, which is 9 o'clock tomorrow night. It's still snowing in North Georgia, western North Carolina, northwestern South Carolina. And if we switch up north and show you the progress of what's going on here in the mid-Atlantic and Northeast, just we could follow along and see how it's doing with the rain line. So there's your high. Look at that. Look, the high is ridiculous. My God, it's out at like 40 and 66. I mean, it's so far east and southeast, and there's nothing to hold the cold air in. All rain in southern New Jersey for the most part. Starts as all rain in New York City and Long Island by 9 o'clock tomorrow evening. It'll snow in Washington, snow in Baltimore, start to snow in Philadelphia before it goes over, to sleet and freeze, and then freezing rain. Mostly snow in Pennsylvania. Northern New Jersey, north from Route 78 northward, it starts to snow at about 8 or 9 o'clock. How long are you going to hold it with that screaming southeast wind that's going to be developed, or east southeast wind that's going to be developing tomorrow evening and tomorrow night? And Joe, I wouldn't be shocked if you wind up seeing that rain snow line push all the way up to Albany, or even beyond it.
Yeah, I would tend to guess. Well, of course, the NAM, the last few storms that we've had, the NAM has been by far and away the winner in calling these events, and so far it has been. We normally think of the NAM as the coolest of the guidance models, but boy, it has really been red flagging a big east southeasterly punch of wind and warming. I mean, you're right. I mean, I'm probably going to start tomorrow morning at or below zero. And you wouldn't think that we'd be talking about mostly a rain event or a snow to rain event here just 12 or 18 hours later. But it looks like that's going to be every bit of that. And by the way, 404 likes. Thank you so much.
Ding-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling. Oh, Joe, I got the FGen map from the 3-kilometer NAM. This is very exciting, except it only goes out to 12 hours, so it can't really show us anything. So I'll have to go to the 20. Yeah, the 3 kilometers is behind, so it doesn't go out far enough. So let's go back to the 12, so we can take a look at the FGen. Excuse me, and the FGen's only out to 20. I went back to the southeast. I mean, look at the Omega in Georgia and South Carolina and up through Alabama. Very impressive. That lifts on up, and then there's more that follows right behind it when the zero line crosses. I get to the 850 goes below zero by me at roughly 4 a.m. I got to look at the 925. Let's see if there's a sounding. Can I pull up a sounding out of this? No, I can't. I think I think I got to do it on the 3 kilometers, so that's not going to help me because it's not far enough. But I dropped to 850 here. Joe goes my zero. What is that? Minus. What are those? Three degree increments? I can't find where the numbers are, but if I'm reading this right in 3-degree increments, it would say that, my 850 temperature is like, either -6 or -9 by midday tomorrow. Yeah, no, -9. No, I'm sorry. I'm at the 700 millibar level. I'm looking at the 700. It's -9 at 700. Let's look at the 850. But I gotta pull up a sounding on one of the other models so I can see at least. No, the 850 was not that. It's not quite like that. The 850 is like minus. There's a big area of -3. So I'm probably at like -4-ish, but that's fine. That's enough. That's cold enough. And a lot of the 850, a lot of FGen a lot of Omega going on tomorrow, starting from about 4 a.m. and then really going gangbusters in the morning until the early afternoon, and then it moves out into South Carolina and North Carolina, but not completely dead, and a lot of very deep circulation as you go further up into the atmosphere with that cold upper low. And the important thing about the upper low is that a lot of that cold air aloft is going to mix down to the surface and cool the bottom part of the atmosphere. And that's when you wind up with big snow issues and surprises underneath the upper low. And the other thing to look at also, we're going to look at the Northeast. I'll bring that up too. And we're up to 415 likes, so I'm getting really thirsty here. But just to check, it's
so am I, Joe.
Yeah, it's too early. There's, I'm looking. I got the Omega up here for tomorrow afternoon. It goes to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You got a lot going on in Virginia and North Carolina, but not much yet going on further north of there. So we would need to hang around,
Joe,
and we're not going to.
Considering you're going to be back in about 14 hours, I say and we've already got more than enough in terms of the likes, and we had a tremendous audience tonight. So why don't we all just gather around the old PC tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. and we'll be back at it. And by then we'll have the new NAM out, the new GFS will be coming out. And I want to just say one other thing is the fact that tomorrow the 12Z runs, those are the last runs that we should be looking at, because after that, especially for you, Joe, it'll be nowcasting.
Yeah.
You have to start nowcasting. You know, I hate when we're right in the middle of an event and you see on television a weathercaster saying, well, I just got the new data, the new NAM or the new GFS. Just can't. You're not supposed to be looking at that.
We don't care. Look out the window.
Start plotting.
Look out the window. Hang on.
It's like with Andy Gregorio.
I'm just going to check my temperature real quick.
It's like what Andy Gregorio was saying when we were reminiscing about the President's Day storm 43 years ago. I mean, he was up at 2 a.m. plotting a sectional, he wasn't looking at the new LFM that was coming out or had been out. He was looking at the stuff that was happening now, and that's what everybody should be doing by late tomorrow and tomorrow night. So tomorrow morning's 12Z run is the last model run that we should be looking at or taking to heart.
Oh, I'm in total agreement. You know, I'm all on this subject matter. You know, absolutely, totally in agreement with you. I mean, from start to finish. Yeah, you shouldn't be looking. You should be looking. You should be looking out the window. You should be looking at what the surface observations. You should be looking at the current radar, and that's it. So anyhow.
Right. Well,
okay,
there's a bottle of cream soda. There's a bottle of cream soda in my refrigerator. It's been yelling for me for the last 15 minutes. And upstairs, I'm thinking about making myself an egg cream, something, because my mouth is like the Sahara Desert.
Yes, mine
right
too.
Now.
Okay, I won the poll tonight, 57-43. I get more snow than you. We'll see. Thanks to everybody that hit Super Chat tonight.
You can have it, Joe. You can have it.
I know.
Yeah.
Thanks for everybody who hit Super Chat tonight. Most appreciated by Joe and I. Wonderful audience to see a nice big audience on a Saturday night. And
wait a minute. One last thing, Joe. Somebody's saying nobody read the Super Chat. I'm scrolling back to find if we missed anybody on Super Chat. I can only scroll back so far, and I don't see any Super Chat hits in the last, let's say, 5 or 10 minutes. So if we missed you, if you did tip us tonight, we always greatly appreciate that.
Yes, we did earlier get as many get every people as they were hitting it, but it's possible we might have missed the last one or two. So if we did miss you, we give you our thanks. Okay, very much for hitting Super Chat. Unless, of course, that person was a troll that said that we didn't read the Super Chats, because we actually did read the Super Chats. So maybe they're just yanking our chains. Either way, we're going, and we'll be back tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern time. We'll see what I'm doing here when we get to 11 a.m. Eastern time. Nighty night, Mr. Rayo. Nighty night, everybody.
Maybe JJ will do the show tomorrow instead of you.
Oh yeah. Speaking of which, I got to take him for his last wee-wees of the night. So night.